everybody. Welcome back to the Next Level podcast with Dr. Leslie. I am your host, Dr. Leslie. Woohoo! Season 3 is off to an amazing start. We have started the season with a relationship series because, well, everything is about self-mastery, biohacking, life hacking, which is what this podcast is about. It's taking you to the next level to reach your highest potential. But once we get to a good place with ourselves, how do we relate to people outside, right? We change, we transform, and being able to relate to people is really an important next step. It's that next level. And it's really a crazy climate right now in dating, particularly here in Las Vegas. Oh my gosh, don't even get me started. And I have an amazing guest today to keep us going on this relationship series that I'm on, Ro Clausen. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back. I love your podcast. Anytime I need to get like grounded and centered, I listen to you because you're just that light in my life.
Oh my God. Thank you. That is so amazing. I mean, with swear words and all, it's grounding you.
Hello.
I'm real. I'm raw. This is how it is.
That's the draw.
Thank you so much. Yes, I appreciate that. So Ro was on my podcast, I think you're my 4th guest when I first started this, over a year and a half ago, or 5th. I was after your husband was on my podcast, talking about resilience and the stories and everything. And I just had to have you on again because we're talking relationships and your circumstance is just so amazing. I wanted to really dive more into that, and this is the perfect time for that. But before we get into it, Ro, we can find you because you have a podcast actually with your husband, right?
I do. Yep.
Gritability.
Yep.
And it's on all the major platforms,
yep,
obviously, and you film that here with us here at Sticky Paws. Yeah.
Yes.
And you also have a nonprofit organization.
I do.
And tell us about that.
Sure. It's called Strong Prison Wives and Families, and that kind of gives a little bit of a hint to my relationship and its little secrets.
Yes, which we're going to open the little Pandora's box today of secrets. So Ro has a very fascinating story. We'll have her talk a little bit about it, but the little Reader's Digest version of it is she met a man who was in prison serving a sentence of 214 years or something like that.
213.
213, and you met him 10 years. You met him 10 years in.
Yep.
And he served only 20 years of the 214 or 213. But you were building a relationship with this guy. You met him when he was already in prison, and you hung on not knowing when he was going to come out and all the things. And now they're together and they have a son, and they are so madly in love. And George, one of the producers that produces their show, their podcast, literally told me, he's like, even when they fight, it's so cute because you could see the love and the devotion in each other. It's just it's so inspiring. And I do want to put a disclaimer out there to everybody. This is not to encourage you to go out and start writing letters to inmates. Okay, this is a beautiful and rare experience that she had. Not saying that it can't happen for you, but I'm not necessarily encouraging. What I'm wanting to extract for all of you listeners is, how do you discern? There's women like me. I mean, I was married for many, many years and happily, and now I'm out dating. I'm in this empowered position, and finding a gentleman is a very interesting and challenging concept. I fell into a relationship with my ex-husband, and it was fine, and it lasted for 14 years. I didn't really know how to date. I didn't know how to be discerning and picking out qualities. Even with my ex, I mean, he's an ex for a reason, and there were some inconsistencies that I didn't necessarily see, which led to the breakup. I'm really a long-term, forever type of person, that I want. And so I thought, who better than someone who had a very unique experience like yours to share wisdom on how did you figure out this was a good guy? And, how did you get here? So that's what I want all of you to take away from today. So let's jump in. Let's recap a little bit about how you met Adam.
Sure. Okay. And also, thank you for that disclaimer, because it's usually on me to do that. And it's difficult because I don't want to talk people out of something, but I gloat about this amazing relationship I'm in. It was hard. A relationship period is hard. But a relationship with somebody behind bars with all these restrictions and these confines. It's hard. And a few years back, there was this trend going around TikTok with these young girls, and it was called the Write a Prisoner Challenge. And I found this young girl who was like 15, 16, who was bragging online about how she was writing this guy. And the crazy thing about this was the worse the charges, because on these websites, it says what their convictions are. And the worse the charges, so like the homicides and all of these were, the better for these young girls, because it was like cool at that point. And I made a response video. I had a YouTube channel. I still have a YouTube channel, but I don't really post on it that much. But it was to support these women and families that were going through this. And I made a response to that. And this young girl reached out to me and she's like, please take the video down. My parents don't know. And so I used it as an experience to teach, like, this is not cool. It's not glamorous. It's not something to glorify. You gave your parents' home address where they live to a man who's convicted of all of these homicides. So he's probably not coming home. But a lot of times they pass that information around the prison. So I'm saying that to say thank you for the disclaimer, because it's usually on me. And I'm like, this is not something that you want to aspire to do. If you find yourself there, I'll help you. But if you don't, maybe don't seek it out. My story specifically, though, I didn't seek it out. I had a very good friend who, her boyfriend, on and off for many years, we were all like doing that Jersey Shore thing that you see on TV or saw on TV, you know, hanging out at the bars down there. They met there. And then for years, it was dating, breaking up, and then somehow one of them would find one another. So they were on a little breakup at that point, and she went searching for him and she couldn't find him. And something told her, like, let me, you know, call hospitals, call jails, and she found him in jail. And so they rekindled their relationship while he was in jail. He was moved to prison because he was serving, I don't remember, somewhere around 10 years. And so when he got to that prison, he met this guy because he's from New Jersey. They were like, all right, go see this guy. He's from Jersey too, bodybuilder. This guy, the friend's boyfriend, was a bodybuilder. The guy that they're introducing him to from New Jersey was all into fitness at that time. He was like the fitness guru. So they strike up a conversation. The bodybuilder guy says, hey, you know, my girlfriend's coming up to see me. She's got a friend. And this was Adam that he was talking to. And Adam's like, yeah, I don't know. And so at the same time, my friend's like, why don't you talk to this guy? And I'm like, no, I don't want to have anything to do with this guy.
So your initial reaction was like, what are you effing crazy?
Absolutely not. Like, for what? And on top of it, he's a lifer. So I'm like, what am I going to do with this? But at that point, I was breaking up with somebody, and it was one of those, like, having these crying fit on her balcony. And so I go home and I sleep on it, and she's like, you know, he's got a website. The next morning when I wake up, and I thought about it, and I checked the website, and it was written so beautifully, where he was taking accountability for what he did, and he was trying to do all of these positive things to make up for what he did not so positive in his past. And he just seemed like he needed a friend, like somebody that was living a positive life as well. So I was like, all right, give him my email. Never interested in romance, but we can go back and forth, because she's like, you know, you can bounce the stuff that you're bouncing off of me about the guy you're breaking up with a guy. Like, he thinks like a guy. Maybe you just need a friend there. So all that put together, I was like, all right, we could email.
So that makes sense. So I'm just trying to really dissect it for all of us out there that are, you know, single and, you know, wanting to figure this whole thing out. So you had someone who kind of connected you. So he was kind of vetted-ish through, you know, your friend who's close to you, or you were close to each other, and her boyfriend who they were rekindling. She obviously had known for quite some time. And so we just didn't know your girlfriend's guy who's in prison, you know, what the association was with Adam. But, you know, there was some knowing, and then the website. So because there was something that told you, I'm going to take a look at his website. So was she really pushing you, like saying he's a good guy, like, or was she just like, no, just come with me? It was more like casual, and there was something inside of you that kind of told you to look into it more?
Yeah, it was kind of a combination of both of those, because we were so close. Our mothers grew up together, so we called each other cousins, but we weren't blood related.
So you're like tight. So she says something, you kind of have a substantial amount of trust in her saying, okay, maybe I will take a look at this.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. That's really important. So you had like a trusted person that kind of opened the door to this whole experience you're about to embark on. Okay, great. So what happens next?
So at that point, they had just put in an email system in the prison where Adam was living. They were piloting this program. First, they started at a women's prison, and then they put it into where he was, because where he was at that time, they housed a lot of the international spies. So they figured it was a good place to get this rolled out. If it could work there, they could roll it out, and it could work everywhere in the federal system. And eventually it did. Which is great because it was kind of like a hands-off type of thing. We hadn't spoken on the phone. I didn't go see him in person. It was just communicating back and forth over email. And as we started communicating, he was so well written. We discovered we had so much in common. And then at this point, maybe like 3 weeks in, I remember I had this specific ringtone when his emails would come into my inbox, and just getting butterflies and being like, shit, like, what am I going to do with this? Like, this is so exciting. Like, he's perfect. This is great. We connect on all these levels, but like, what the hell am I going to do with this? And that's how it was for, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks before I went to go see him in person.
Wow. Yeah, the emotional connection, women, we just like, that's a big deal for us. The communication, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then especially when it's with somebody in prison or somebody that you haven't seen and there's no physical connection, you can go deep really fast. It's a weird, like, you feel safe in a weird way because it's behind, like, you can hide behind not seeing that person, them not being in front of you. So it was like we were both able to peel back these layers.
It's interesting because, you know, I had a dating coach on when I first started the series, and she was saying, you know, about the dating apps. You really want to go on a date like really quickly as soon as you meet someone on an app. Like, don't talk and talk and talk. Just like, if you're interested, you communicate, you set up a coffee, and you go as soon as you can. Don't get emotionally invested. And it's funny because I was on an app for like a week once, and I had this, you know, I met this one guy, and we chit-chatted for, you know, a good couple of days, and I was like, oh, there's so much in common, blah, 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 all the things. And then as soon as I met him, nothing. Like, there was nothing there. It was almost like, and just the way he spoke and some of the mannerisms, and like, then things just weren't there. So it's funny how the emotional connection was there. Did you at all worry about when you met him, what was going to happen? Or like, did you try to pull the brakes on yourself and just be like, okay, I know that I'm getting connected, but I know he's a lifer, and maybe I shouldn't get my hopes up because maybe in person he's going to be different. Like, any of that stuff?
Oh my God. Up until I met him, and even like the very first night.
That's crazy. What am I doing?
For 10 years, 11 years until he came home, I would have to check myself. Like, what are you doing? What's wrong with me? Everybody else thinks something's wrong with me. There has to be something wrong with me. Why am I doing this? But it was like that pull, and that it was just the heart wants what the heart wants. You know that quote? And when we finally decided that, okay, this is it, we're going to do this, because he told me, he's like, I have no expectations, like, live your life. And I tried to date other guys. It just, they weren't Adam. It wasn't him. Now, going back to what you said about your dating coach, Dr. Phil did this episode about prison wives. And when a lot of the prison wives and family members that I coach, when they saw this, their response was like, how dare he, da-da-da. And I said, but don't listen to how he's saying this, right? His presentation seemed judgmental. Listen to the words he's saying, because he was onto something. And what he said was, like your dating coach, meet very quickly, because in a prison relationship, you have only very few forms of communication. I was lucky enough to have email. A lot of people don't. You have post office mail. You have your visits and phone calls. Other than that, and those are all very limited and restricted, and they're all listened to. So other than that, everything else exists in fantasy, in your head. So you can fill in those gaps. So you can make him out to be whoever you want him to be in those gaps. And that's what Dr. Phil was saying. And you start to like romanticize and glamorize those gaps, and not exactly what the person's always giving you. Adam always gave me positive, which is great. But we also met, I was 31 and he was 33. So we were a little bit older.
Well, I would consider that young.
Young. Definitely
but
young.
Yes.
But had I not experienced like the nonsense of the 20s,
True. Yes.
then I don't think I would have been able to put in what I was able to put in to make it the relationship that it is today.
You both met at an amazing time because you had enough relationship experience where you weren't so green that you ended up, you knew discernment, you had emotional intelligence, you had just experience to kind of like navigate, but not so late that you've had so many relationships that you're bitter and angry and you're skeptical, and you wouldn't have even probably, if you had, if this was 10 years later that you met him when you're in your 40s, like I'm 40, I wouldn't have even, my girlfriend, I don't care how close we are, there's no fucking way I'm going to prison.
It's true. You say that, and he was released when I was 41 and 41, 42, 41, something, it doesn't really matter. But that was the closest that I was to breaking up with him in all those years. And I don't know if I ever would. There was this whole drama around his release, which we waited for and wasn't supposed to happen. So you would think, oh my God, like this is the day, right? I'll tell you the story because I'm not making it make sense.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I didn't realize that's
So
intense.
So we had like these ups and downs of the 10 years, ups and downs as far as legal stuff, not our relationship. We were always very strong in our relationship. But so it was COVID. It was the fall right before COVID. So it was 2019. He was able to put in for an appeal. They waited. People are starting to submit their own appeals using Adam's name because Adam's lawyer created basically like a template for people to submit using Adam's case. But he's like, it's not time yet for your case. So now like a year is going by and I'm like, when's it going to be our turn? Like all these people are getting out using your name on their form. They're not even changing their name. They're getting out and I'm sitting here waiting, right? And I want a baby, like my biological clock. So finally, his lawyer's like, okay, it's time. And we wait, and we wait, and we wait. Now COVID happens. So it was the fall before COVID, all of this started.
Why was the lawyer waiting? What was the point?
Because
what was
Adam's crime was violent. I'm not even going to air quote that. It was violent, right? There was a gun involved. He didn't use the gun, but because the gun was involved, it's considered an act of violence.
Right.
So, and with all of these stacked, he's like a poster boy for don't let him out because God forbid he reoffends.
Right.
And so he said no politician, no judge, nobody was going to sign their name to this at that point.
Okay.
They needed
it was political.
more. It
Totally
was political. Totally political.
Okay.
So, so finally, it's our turn. He submits it. We wait. We're waiting. And then he finally gets a judge that says, I'll hear this. So he gives him, he vacates his sentence, meaning like he doesn't have 213 years anymore, but they're going to go back to court and figure out what he does have. He had already had 20 years, 5 months, and I don't remember how many days he knows to a T, but not that he counted or anything. But the judge is like, he doesn't have that, but like he could come back and give him 210 years if he wants. He could give him time served, walk out the door. We don't know what it is. So, because it's during COVID, he would have to sit and wait. And he's like, I don't care. Like, my attorney can go for me. I'm going to waive my right to be there at trial. My attorney, who, by the way, was a bank robber and served 12 years and became a Georgetown lawyer. Totally different story for another time. Amazing. Mind blown.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. So, but he's like, because of that, I know that he knows this better than anybody else. And if I'm going to waive my right, he's the only person I'll allow him to go in there and do that. So he went in, he did it the day before this court date. I'm like, I'm going to go. Like, I want to be there to pick him up if he says time served. Actually, this is 2 days before. His attorney's name is Sean. And Sean's like, Ro, like, pump the brakes. Maybe not. I don't want you to get there and have to turn around. And I'm like, well, whether you tell me or not, I'm going because I don't want to miss this. Like, I've dreamed about this for years. So the following day he calls me and he's like, listen, he's like, I just got news from the U.S. attorney that they're not going to appeal this. Like, this looks really good. I'm going to change my mind. Like, I think you should go. So I'm driving 6 hours thinking I'm going to pick him up that afternoon. It was court. I'm an hour away from the hotel room I was staying at. And I get a call from Sean. And I'm like, how did it go? And he's like, it went okay. He said, the judge started by saying, what if I gave him 30 years? Which means another 10 at this point. And I felt my heart sink to my toes because I'm like, I don't want to wait 10 years. So he said both myself, and the U.S. attorney jumped up and were like, we don't think that's appropriate. Like he's definitely done his time. So they argued. The judge decides, let me take some time and think about this. I'll get back to you guys. I'm thinking, okay, that means the weekend. Adam's like, that means like whenever he decides. It could be, he could wait a year, he could wait a couple days. We don't know. So I had packed my car, driven 6 hours, thinking I'm picking him up after 11 years, ups and downs and highs and lows, and I'm going home without him. And I don't know, like we're still close. He still doesn't have a life sentence that's gone. And I'm like, I don't know if I could do this anymore. I've been so close and the highs have been so high. I thought I was picking him up. And the lows have been so low. When we thought he was getting clemency in 2016, I remember when that door was shut, they told us his petition made it to the vice president's desk. We just ran out of time. I would be at my desk at work and tears would just start. Like I would have to run to the bathroom to make it stop. And like I'm telling you, the highs were so high, the lows were so low. And I'm in this hotel room going, I don't know if I could do this. So I drove home. This was Saturday. I drove home 6 hours. Like Sunday, I just kind of relaxed. Monday, I'm working. My car's still fully packed. Tuesday morning, I wake up and I'm like, I gotta unpack this goddamn car. I don't want to do this. So I set up my computer working from home, COVID. I set up the blender on the counter because I'm about to make myself breakfast. And I'm like, all right, after I make breakfast, I'll go unpack the car. My phone rings and it's Sean. And his wife is also an attorney who worked on the case, and she's screaming in the background. And she's like, he's like, he got it. Time served, time served.
Oh my God. Oh, I just have chills down my arm.
Right? But my response, you ready? My response goes, okay. His wife is screaming like I should be in the background. And I'm like, okay, what does this mean? I was emotionally so destroyed
You
at
were
that point.
numb and done. And yeah.
And I was like, I'll believe it when I see it. So he's like, Ro, you can go get him now. And I'm like, okay.
You spent 6 hours digesting and processing the depression, the hopelessness. Like you had connected to the loss.
I think, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for putting, because it's been years and I couldn't put it into words, but that's exactly what it was. So finally I got myself, I was like taking clothes out of the dryer. Like I was just so numb. It should be processing, right? And my girlfriend, Sarah, I called her, one of my closest friends. Her husband was in prison at the time. And she was jumping up and down in her bed like, Ro, this is happening. And I'm like, yeah, it's happening.
I can put myself there because I know what that feels like when you've waited, and then you've really literally given up on something. And it's like the moment you release it, you get what you want. And then it's like, what? Oh,
right. And I'm kind of glad I did that because for the next 6 hours driving back there, I'm not exaggerating, must have spoken to the attorney 50 times where he called me. I was 10 minutes into my drive and he's like, oh God, Ro, turn around. Right? I was like, I started laughing because I'm just like, of course, like, thank God I'm not having an emotional response to this other than like apathy. I don't know what it was at that point, but I was like, what?
You were numb. Like you were just
So
totally
numb.
numbed out. Yeah.
And he goes, the judge's order says, this is Tuesday. The judge's order says he has to be released on Thursday. And I'm like, okay. Now he's reading this in real time on the phone with me. Oh, wait, by Thursday. So maybe not. Let me call the prison. And at that point, I'm like, well, I'm just going to keep driving. What's 2 days in a hotel? Who cares? It's August in Pennsylvania. I could sit by the pool. Not a big deal.
Sure.
Working from home. I could bring my computer. But calls me back. He's like, no, it's not happening. Calls me back. Keep going. Literally so many times. We didn't have a place to stay. Like it was just ridiculous. But finally, it got to the point where I was able to pick him up. And it was beautiful and wonderful. Not anything like I dreamed, but it was beautiful and wonderful.
Did you pick him up on Thursday? Was it the Thursday release?
It was Wednesday.
It was the next day.
It was Wednesday, but maybe it was Thursday. I just remember being in the hotel and being like, on Tuesday night being like, it's not going to happen because Sean's like, there still might be time. We still might be able to do this. And then the following day, I remember. So the prison locks down for a count at 3:00 p.m. Sean calls me right before count all day long, back and forth, right? And I was on the phone. I couldn't eat for all this time. Like I was barely drinking. I was just so like nervous, not everything. So I'm on the phone with my girlfriend who actually had done some time. I swear I don't only have people in my life that have been to prison, but these
It's the Jersey thing, is it?
Maybe,
I'm kidding.
I don't know.
I'm kidding. Well, you know what? They're real. I find like those people are real in a
Right?
different way.
Right.
Again, not go seeking out people who have been in prison for friends, but some of us just can appreciate the quirks that they have.
Right. And I'll side note and say it was the support group I had created because I did not have anybody in my life that had ever experienced this.
It's true. You were 10 years in. So,
I was 10 years in, and I created my own little circle because I didn't have that. So at this point, it was a girlfriend who had done some time herself, and she's like, Ro, like, he can't call you. The phone's off. That's a good sign. Oh, but wait, it's not a good sign. So I'm like, like all these different directions. I'm on the phone with her sitting in Subway, of all places, but like I knew I needed to eat, and I'm in nowhere, Pennsylvania, like the armpit. That's the only place I could eat. I ordered myself a disgusting sandwich, sitting at the table on the phone with her, and I'm like, oh, hold on, it's the prison. I click over, and the woman says, in this voice, you can pick up Clausen now. And I was like, okay. Go back on the phone. And I'm like, they said I could pick him up. She's like, get in the fucking car. Because I'm 10 minutes away. I'm flying there. Like, I got to get to him.
Before something
Right.
changes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what was it like when you finally, you were able to, well, hold on. I need to backtrack a little bit. So he was in a federal, right?
Yes. Yep.
I'm going to go there.
Okay.
They don't have, what are those? Conjugals?
No. They don't even have, because he
You
was
didn't
in like.
kiss him? You weren't able to hold him or anything? Like probably a hug when you walk in, but
That's
nothing.
a great question. Because we had a friend who, like, his fantasies were, he was like, so you're looking forward to your next conjugal? And I'm like, no, we don't get conjugals. And every time I spoke to him, he's like, so how's that conjugal? And I'm like, we don't get them. And I'm like, he couldn't process it for himself. So when he was in a high security, which was 10 years, and I was with him that last year. So it was 09 to 2010 is the years that I was with him there. And at that point, it was across the table from one another. We couldn't touch. We couldn't hold hands. It was one hug and one kiss to say hello, and one hug and one kiss to say goodbye. Supposed to be a closed mouth kiss. I mean, you do what you can get away with. But they'll like embarrass you if it's too long or whatever. They'll be like, Clausen, that's enough. It happens all the time. It's kind of
Whatever.
ridiculous.
Who cares?
Yeah. And then in the medium, when he moved down, which was the next 9 years of our, or 10 years of our relationship while he was inside, we could sit next to each other. We could hold hands. And what's interesting is he said that that was the most intimate experience of his whole entire life with a woman, was just being able to hold hands at that point. He could put his arm around me. You know, we could kind of like touch each other's leg, but you would get in trouble if, one time he got spoken to because my hand was too high on his leg. And I'm like, what am I going to do here? Like, what is that going to do for him? Right. In a visit room. But yes. And then it was a hug and a kiss hello, and a hug and a kiss goodbye.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tough.
Yeah. So no conjugals.
So did you just tear it up when that first night he was back? Like, tell me all the juice.
Okay.
Like,
all right, Adam, don't listen to this podcast.
I'm so not sorry, Adam. I need to go there because this is fascinating.
I'm totally not sorry. This is girlfriend time, and he's not going to listen because this came up once, and like I made like a little comment.
No, we're going there.
Yeah,
Give me
on our
every
podcast.
detail.
But he turned so red. I'm like, all right, I'm not going to go there. So go to pick him up. My fantasy is like ugly crying, embracing, you know, whatever. It didn't happen like that because 3 weeks before his release, there was a man named Chad who was released, same law, same everything, same exact way. He gets to the door. His family sees him. He's dressed out to go. And they're like, nope, turn around. The attorney issued a stay, meaning he couldn't go home that day. And from that point forward, until things progressed, he had his life sentence back. And I remember saying to Adam at that point, I was like, if that happened, I don't know if I could ever recover from that. Like seeing you walking out the door and then they're like, just kidding. So now that's in my head. So I go to pick up Adam after these, well, I guess it's 4 days of just like drama. You can come pick up Clausen now. I'm in the car on the way there. I'm like, I just got to get him in the car. Pull up. He's like, you were kicked back, sunglasses on. I don't remember it like that. I just remember pulling up. He comes out the door pushing this cart. And I'm like, I don't know how we're going to get your books and your boxes in this car because it's jam-packed. I don't even know how we're getting you in the car. He comes out. I give him a hug and a kiss and 2 seconds. This cop comes out because it's shift change. Cops and COs, that's what we call them. It was a CO, and he goes, Clausen, they want you back inside. I thought I was going to pass out. I grabbed him. It was a joke. The guy didn't know. He was like, he had a good rapport. That's how I felt. I'm like, get in the car. We're leaving.
I'm so captivated by your story. I literally feel like I'm watching a movie that made me sick in my
That's
stomach.
how I felt. That's exactly how I felt. And like, I couldn't shake that for a couple minutes, but the juicy stuff. So now.
Yeah, let's get to the juice. So you're in the car. You have freedom. Like, did it hit you guys? Like, how long did it take you to realize I get to do whatever I want to him or him to you? Like,
I think it took
30 seconds.
So here's another part of the story I didn't tell you. But during those 50 calls between the attorney Sean and myself, one of them was the judge isn't going to let him out unless he has a place. You guys have a place to quarantine in Pennsylvania because it's COVID. We have to stay 2 weeks someplace. And if you don't find a place,
2 weeks,
I know,
mandatory in a bedroom.
I know. But if you don't find a place, he's going to solitary confinement for those 2 weeks. So it's like pressure's on. So we called his best friend, who's also his co-defendant on this case. Didn't get nearly as much time, only did 10 years. Story for a different time. It's on our podcast if anyone's interested. But he's like, his girlfriend at the time, wife now, was like 8-9 months pregnant. He's like, you guys can't stay here. I'm sorry, we just moved into this tiny little place, but I'm going to get you your place wherever you want to stay, like an extended stay, 2 weeks on me. The judge was like, yeah, right. That's not happening. Denied. Find someplace else. So
why? What was the reasoning?
Because it's his co-defendant. And so, like,
oh yeah, I was gonna say co-defendant. I don't think you can.
They're not supposed to. And the judge was in a hotel. Like, no, absolutely not. Find some place that I'm gonna approve. Right?
They wouldn't allow a hotel at that time.
No.
Oh wow.
Nope.
Okay.
No. So go back and like we're calling all these people. Sean's like, I can try to get them to like let you guys stay in Wisconsin with his mom. His mom's like, I literally 3 weeks ago moved from my 3-bedroom condo into a tiny little 1-bedroom apartment. I'm sorry, like I don't have room for you guys. But I'm like, why am I'm not staying. We gotta get this in your 1-bedroom.
Yeah.
Not happening.
Yeah.
So his mother, being a loving mother, picks up the phone, makes this phone call. She said, you told me if I ever needed anything to give you a call. Can my son stay? Da da da. And the person she called was like, absolutely. And then the next breath, he's like, but let me ask my wife. And the wife said yes, but it was a U.S. attorney. So who Adam met while he was inside. He was a prosecutor, right? They became friendly. They had a good rapport.
So Adam's mom, who did she call?
She calls this U.S. attorney / now judge. Who she's like, you said if I ever needed anything and I need something.
How did they know each other? How did that work out?
Through Adam.
Just through this whole thing?
Like, he's like, listen, I can.
Wow.
Like, I really like Adam, but it was like very professional. But now I'm going, you're taking him from jail and you're putting us in jail. Like, you're going to a judge's house? What the fuck? I was like, I'm going to drop you off and I'll pick you up in 2 weeks. This is so bizarre. I just like had visions of us sitting in a living room, like, you know, like just not cool. It was nothing like that, but I didn't know. They had built a mother-in-law suite for his wife's father. He stayed for less than a year before he passed. So they used this suite for people that they wanted to help in like transitional points in their life. They had people who were going through divorces, people through their church. They had, we were just in a 2-week window where their niece was about to move in because she was going back to nursing school. She was living with them, but she wasn't there yet. So we fit right in there and he's like, please come. Like it was the best 2-week vacation of my whole entire life. Yeah. But I felt like a 16-year-old. Right, because they're next door. It's like my parents are upstairs and I'm trying to get it on, like ridiculous Netflix and chill, stupid situation. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, like, did it take you a little bit of time to warm up to each other, or did like the clothes come off and you're just like done? Was it like the first night you got home?
Yeah, no, it was at the judge's house. I mean,
no, but like when you got to
you
got to their place, it was on that night.
Yeah.
Okay, what was it like the first time you actually like kissed him, like really kissed him? So at some point, did you like first have that moment of intimacy and like make out at the judge's house?
So this is how it happened. We had a 2-hour drive to the judge's house.
How many times did you stop?
I I think 2 or 3, but like not to do anything. It was still like that, like, because
Numb,
remember,
weird,
you've been
yeah.
together 11 years, but you never touched. So, and I'm like shy and awkward, and he hasn't, he's like, it was just kind of like awkward, right? But we get to the judge's house, like we get settled in. They were so sweet. They set us up in our little room. It's probably like 11 o'clock at night at this point. They go to bed. We go into our little room. Now, remember, it's like the house is connected, but it's also our own little apartment. So in the room is like a little attached bathroom, and he was in the bathroom brushing his teeth, and I was getting changed. And as soon as I took off my shirt, he like comes running out of the bathroom. And that was like when we had our first very intimate kiss, and it led into, our first like intimate experience together.
And how was that? I mean, for women, it's sex and the whole intimacy. It's an emotional thing.
Yeah.
But was it what you had dreamed of or expected, or was it awkward? Was it like, what was, you don't have to get into the details, obviously, of what happened, but just like, what was that?
It was not awkward in the least. The only thing that was like a little bit uncomfortable about it was that we were in these people's house and the bed was like squeaky. So that was embarrassing. I'm like, no, we can't, like, this is embarrassing. They're being so gracious to us. I'm like, get on the floor. So we got on the floor because I'm like, I'm not going to have them hearing this. Like, how embarrassing, right?
Sure.
But like our connection and the sex itself was beautiful.
Oh,
yeah, it was amazing. Yeah.
And just, sorry, Adam, I'm going to ask the question. I mean, what was that like for him? Like, what was it like for him? Because this was a long time. I know men are generally more sexual creatures. I know I've used this technique in the past when I went for a very, very long time without being intimate, sexual energy transmutation, which I had him on the podcast. So he talked a little, not about this, but just, I know he has such a strong mindset and will, and his energy, but was it like an emotional experience for him?
I think so. We didn't really talk about it like that. What happened after that, though, was we always talked about wanting to start a family and wanting to start a family like as soon as possible, because at this point, I was 41, 42, somewhere in there. And we had this following online at this point because I had started that YouTube channel and that nonprofit, not only to support one another, but to get his story out there, to get supporters. So we had all these people who were so invested, right? And we're doing like these live videos to keep everybody posted because they were very sweet. They started sending us stuff for our house, and very, very sweet. But in there, people are going, when are you going to make a baby? When are you going to do this? When's the baby coming? And it got in his head because we don't have a home. Like, we're literally driving across the country to Las Vegas without any place to live at this point. Got our condo on the way driving there. He doesn't have he's going for this job, not the best salary at this point, just out of prison. We're still learning one another. That's a lot for a man, especially.
Yes.
So for maybe like 2 or 3 days, it was awkward when it came to that. And then finally we just had to have a talk about it. And I think that like that wraps this episode, not that we're wrapping, but like that is kind of like what I want to pass along to anybody in a relationship, any type of relationship, but what made our relationship so, so strong and to stand that test and any test life has thrown at us since is the communication. And I think not having the physical for all of those years, we learned how to communicate so deeply. So in that instance, I remember vividly sitting in the bed in that little mother-in-law suite at the judge's house, and he's like, so like, to make the baby thing, like, how do you feel about that? And I was like, I mean, on one hand, I would love that. On the other hand, we're not ready. I know we're older, but like, we're not ready. We're not settled. Sure. And I could see it all just like drain out of him. Like, I feel the exact same way. Thank God we're on the same page as always. And then the intimacy just like went right back to where it was. Because when something's like lingering for anybody, you can't connect on that level.
Yeah, absolutely. So communication, you said it so perfectly. That's probably really, again, not to be promoting this type of engagement or this type of situation, but because you didn't have the intimacy and the physical intimacy and to be swayed by, men like to love bomb and, they can be manipulative and they can, just really lay it on thick with the physical gestures and money and whatever else, you literally just had yourselves. And I'm sure, and I know this, women can be much more able to discern when they're not being swept away by all of the shiny things, the bells and the whistles and all the outside. When you have to just communicate, you get to know somebody.
Absolutely.
So let's now backtrack since we got to the juicy kind of fun stuff. I always love to hear like the intimacy. I'm a pleasure person. It's really important to connect with your partner and make love. It's an amazing expression of love. So I always like to make sure we hit on those pieces. But so to backtrack, when you're going through these 10 years and you're doubting yourself, like, what am I doing? And I'm crazy. And, people are challenging you and saying, I mean, what are you doing? Right? What was it about? I know you had said that you just had this connection, you had this pull, there was this draw to him, you tried to date other people, and you just kept going back to him. What were sort of the pieces that really made that draw? Like, yes, the heart, but there's always the logical mind. What made the heart win for you specifically? Like, what did he say? Did he do? What were those determining pieces, like the honesty, the reliability, his, those fundamental things that you knew that he was a good guy?
Yeah. So I love this question because I can gush about him all day because he makes it easy, right? When he was inside, like you said, he couldn't do anything for me. He could do what he could do for me, if that makes sense. So for example, I was pouring everything I had into trying to find a loophole in his case law, right? And I think that a lot of people that go through this experience, like that's something that you do to cope in the beginning. And I literally would go to work. I would come home. I was existing at the time. This is so embarrassing, but on cigarettes and an apple a day and coffee. Lived on coffee. And I got down to, I don't even know how much I weighed, but I remember this all hit me when I was standing in a dressing room and I had to go into the little girl section to try on a pair of pants because adult clothes didn't fit me at that point. I was literally just existing on that, going to work, coming home, and doing all of that kind of research, trying to find the loophole, trying to connect with the right person. Because if I'm going to be the one, I'm going to be one to find this. I'm going to be the one. Now, this is very, very early on, but like, I'm going to be the one that gets him home so we can have our life together. And I remember sitting in the dressing room, looking and seeing like this gray shell of myself. Now, this is after I competed. Like, I knew all the right things to do. I just wasn't doing them because I'll do that later. I was not taking care of myself. Like a lot of women do, especially when they get into a new relationship. Well, I had told him about this gym that I had tried out a couple years before where it was like this underground, kind of like a CrossFit type of thing, but before CrossFit was really popular. And I was like, he goes, why don't you try to go back? Like, I think that would be really good for you. And I'm like, nah, making excuses like I'm not in shape. I have to get myself in shape first. Well, what I think he did, and I have to ask him, like, because I forgot about this until now, but a couple weeks later, I get a text from the guy that owned the gym. And he's like, hey, why don't you come back? Blah, blah, blah. We miss you here. And I'm like, yeah, I need to do like a boot camp with myself before I come back. He goes, that's what this is for, like to get you in shape. But I pieced it together because Adam had asked me for the address to that gym. And I was like, why do you need it? And he goes, oh, my friend's looking into, like, just kind of, he wrote him a letter and asked him. So he did what
Oh my God, that's so romantic. It's so simple. It's so simple, but it's a big gesture.
It's a big gesture. And just like things like that compounded. So another time he's like, listen, he's like, you might not hear from me for the next couple of days. Things in here are going to get busy. But I need you to know it has nothing to do with you. I'm still so into this. I still love you. Da, da, da. And this is still very early on. How many times does a guy do that? They'll just ghost and come back and be like, oh, I was busy. And it was...
yes.
Right?
They do that all the time. Right. Do they do that all the time? New engineer.
I don't do that personally, but I've seen it. Yes.
Yes.
They do that.
I know.
Very good answer.
Right. Bullshit. Excuse me. I'm kidding. It's weird. Yeah, the ghosting thing. That's beautiful.
It was beautiful.
That is a very, very important thing. That is on the checklist.
Here's another one. I would go into visit and I would come out of visit. And going in and coming out almost every time I was stopped by somebody's mother, somebody's girlfriend, somebody's something saying, your boyfriend, husband, whatever at the time, he's such a good guy. He's helped my son, my boyfriend, in so many ways.
Wow.
And just so that's a lesson for everybody. It doesn't take jail, right? What do other people say about the person?
Right.
How does he present himself? Because it could be the love bombs and all of this stuff that he's presenting, but eventually that mask will slip. But when other people see it that aren't his close friends and they make those comments, those are the things to pay attention to. And I did, and that happened. I mean, that happens to this day because he is just such a caring individual. But back then, when I was trying to decide if this was something that I wanted to pursue or if I wanted to pursue other options because I didn't want to wait around, those were the things that kept me there.
Yeah. So when you, I'm sure, approached him, or I think you had said at one point that he said, I don't have any expectation. I want you to like go and date or whatever. Like he encouraged you and just said, whatever, do your thing. And you tried, you obviously probably still kept in touch with him or because you kept having the draw. He didn't he really didn't expect anything of you. He really wanted you to just be happy and was okay with that. I mean, it's very, very humbling being locked up.
Yeah.
I mean, you just take what you can get and it really does push you to be resilient in a whole new way.
Yeah.
If you are a person who will rise to that challenge. And it sounds like he was.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's the key. If you're the type of person that will rise to the challenge and if you choose to do that time to rehabilitate yourself and not get sucked into that criminal lifestyle in there.
Right. So did you get married while he was away or?
No, we didn't. So we referred to each other as husband and wife. He started that because that level of commitment. But I always said, I'm not going to marry you in here because number one, I'm from a huge Italian family and I didn't want to, my parents were like, they didn't want to address it. I wasn't going to do that to disrespect them. But also, equally as important, I wanted to make sure that I fought for our wedding to be on the outside. I would do anything to marry him. I would do anything to get him out. And so I always kept that as like the carrot dangling. So we got married in 2020. Got married when CJ was a year. So we wanted to do it on February 13th to honor the 213. That didn't happen because I got the worst stomach virus I've ever had in my life.
No.
Let me tell you something. I've never gotten the stomach virus. 1 year on Christmas, my entire family, 20 people got the stomach virus. I was the last man standing, right? My sisters were joking that's when Ebola was coming back around.
Oh, God.
Those couples, they're like, you survived Clement Ebola. 'Cause that was my last name they made up. So never got it up until I'm supposed to get married, right? So the next day, the 14th, I wake up because I got it the Friday before. The 13th is a Sunday, supposed to be the wedding. And I'm like, I can't. I'm sorry. I can't even stand up. And so he's like, people have cashed in some favors. Like, is there anything you can do? Go without makeup. I'm like, I'm not going to my wedding without makeup. Are you kidding me?
My God, how
Right?
could
Like,
you even say such a thing?
I was like, I'd rather go in jeans and a t-shirt and make, but no, like that's not, I waited this long for this. That's not what's happening. He's like, can you do anything? I'm like, okay, let me try to rally. I'm not saying I should have done this. I drove 6 hours to go to prison visit with the shingles and drove 6 home. I should not have done that, but I did. So it's not like I can't rally, okay?
Okay.
I got lip filler. We talked
Yes,
about this earlier.
exactly.
So I'm like, all right, I'm going to try. I get up, I get in the shower. I tried to blow dry my hair, and he found me like laid out on the bed with the blow dryer in my hand, sopping my hair. I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't. So we packed it in. We called our judge, very dear friend, judge friend, who was going to perform the ceremony that day. And she tried every which way, but she's like, I get it. The next day, she was not letting us not do this. And she's like, how you feeling? And I'm like, actually, I feel a little better. Like, I had some crackers. She's like, you want to do it? My dad was still in town. Adam's mom was still in town. So I'm like, yeah, I think I can do this. And she's like, all right, 3:00, park across the street from your house. We're going to do this. I got it. So we get there. And this is the best part. She said, This was supposed to happen on 213, but the universe didn't want that to happen. They wanted all that to be left in the past. Today is 214, which is Valentine's Day, and I find that to be so cheesy, but it's okay because she made it better by saying it was supposed to be from today forward, 214 moving forward. I thought it was beautiful, and that's my little wedding story. So it was 2 years ago,
Yeah.
almost exactly.
Wow. That's so incredible. I can't help but recognize all the synchronicities and how the universe was really working
Oh my God, yeah.
with you guys purposefully. And sometimes we don't get what we prefer, right? But you didn't necessarily take those things as stopping blocks or whatever. Like it really, you had this magnetism, you had this devotion, you obviously had discernment. You just knew from all of your experiences with him, this is the person that you wanted. You made great decisions, even though there were those things that you could have bailed or been like, it was all conspiring for you in these beautiful ways. And it wasn't easy. I'm sure it could have been easy for you and many people to just be like, okay, it's not meant to be. And what am I doing? And leave and run away from love, run away from what the heart says. You both just barreled in and you just locked in. I mean, it's really so brave and courageous for you both to follow your heart. That's scary for a lot of people. Sometimes the heart, I know many people out there listening, they followed their heart and it didn't turn out the way they wanted, or it led to a lot of heartache, or they felt fooled. There are many times in my journey I felt fooled in love. Really, it was me fooling myself. No one can really fool you. And this is why it's so fascinating to me, your story, because there's so many parts to, again, you can know yourself, but then how do you relate to somebody else? How do you know that that person is like you or is good for you or whatever? It's a whole different beast. Self-mastery, but then mastering how to interact and discern other people. It's like common sense. For the longest time, I didn't have common sense. This is why I, was indicted and have a felony, because it's like, okay, I had no fucking common sense. I was just, this nerd doing my thing, thinking that I could trust everybody. And I had, no clue what was going on. I mean, I told you before we started recording, I met my ex-husband. So before I met him, I was working at a nightclub. He was bringing his people in, and he was the owner of this tour and transportation company. And actually, the first night I met him, he was telling me all of his problems. He was breaking up with a girl, and I'm like, oh my God. I mean, poor girl who ends up marrying this guy because he was so broken. Yeah, right. And then I ended up meeting him 6 months later, right before I was about to quit, and we kind of connected, and it was like business. He's like, oh, you should be a model, and I'm like, I do modeling on the side, and whatever. So we were recording for 6 weeks. Right, just on the phone. He was traveling. I was in school, whatever. So we were just chatting. So we got to know each other pretty well. I mean, as well as you can in 6 weeks. And then as soon as we met, like we went on our first date, it was like we spent the weekend together, and it was like the rest was history, basically. But I was young. I was like 19, and I just kind of fell into it. Didn't really know anything about dating. It kind of worked out until it didn't. And so now, being single for a while and being back in the dating game, I'm just like, it's not like that anymore. I'm older, I'm wiser, I'm empowered, I have baggage. I don't even want to call it baggage, but experience. And life just doesn't happen like that with people. But that's where I'm learning, like, okay, we need to be discerning. I need to like do things differently, because I keep thinking it could just be easy. I'm real and I'm doing all the things, but it's not always reciprocated. So I'm seeing that, the communication and learning somebody's true nature takes time. Even with my ex-husband, we were also codependent. So we were a perfect codependent match, but I'm not codependent anymore. So it takes a lot more. The communication is really, really important, and asking the right questions and seeing how they're open and responding. I also wanted to mention the emotional maturity is really important, like not getting ahead of yourself. Like you kind of put the brakes on it at sometimes, right, with yourself, or like checked yourself. Am I getting ahead of myself? A lot of women don't do that. They just kind of throw themselves in, whether there are red flags or not. They go with their heart, and they just don't have, again, I love the word discernment, because that really was what it is. And so it was great. You were very smart. You knew a lot about relationships and how to, figure out that Adam was a good guy. You're very lucky. Maybe your parents taught you. Maybe, how did you learn how to figure out men?
I am so blessed in this area because my parents knew each other since they were 7 and 9 years old. They lived next door to one another. They both came over from Italy, separate families. And my mother's oldest sister worked with my father's mother. So they knew each other, and they were outside one day, and my dad said he saw my mother, and he says to his mother, my grandmother, "That's the girl I'm going to marry one day." Now he's 9 years old, and he says the way the story goes is my grandmother smacked him on the back of the head and said, "What do you know about marriage?" But he just loved her like I've never seen somebody love somebody ever. And their love story was so beautiful. And they went through a lot together, and they grew up together. They got married at 24 and 26. They had 6 kids, and they always they never fought in front of us. Obviously they fought. They were married for 42 years before my mother passed away. But I just had such a wonderful example of how you should act in a relationship. And I went through my same, like the 19-year-old experience. I went through so many of those ridiculous young relationships. But that taught me what I didn't want. And I'm sure same for you. And like you said, it's different when you're older and you have, I love that you chose the word experience, right? You don't get to 40 without a lot of life experience. Amazing. Yes, you had some hardships, some ups and some downs. If you didn't, you wouldn't be alive. It's beautiful. And I think for you, honestly, the next person that comes along, it's going to be fast as it should. But like you said, it's going to be, I think it'll be so beautiful, and it's going to take time to peel back those layers and to learn one another at this age. But it's going to be so different from that like fast, furious, 19-year-old, hot and heavy, this is the guy I'm going to spend the rest of my life with forever romance, which I think sometimes in our mind you want to chase, but that's also not the reality of a 40-year-old. And I don't think 40-year-olds want that.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I feel so outdated. I'm like, I'm back in the dating world. And Vegas is, everyone says, I've said this, I think, on every single podcast in this relationship series. Vegas is an anomaly. Other people say, no, it's like everywhere else. It isn't. It really is not. Even like for anywhere.
Friendships. No, I'm with you. And before I moved here, Adam had a very good friend from Philly that had moved here right after he went away. So about 20 years ago. And I became friendly with his wife, and I came out here for a visit one time, and she's like, they were trying to talk me into moving here before I actually moved here. And she's like, I'll be your friend. It's really hard to make friends here. It's such a transient town.
It is.
So I could not even imagine having to add dating into that mix when it's hard to even just like meet good people, you know?
Yeah, who knows? Maybe the ghosting is because he just fucking skipped out of town.
Right. I'm done with this place. But it would be nice to get a text or a call if not the right one. Exactly. Not the right one.
Right. Yeah, it's so funny. Wow, this is so amazing. Thank you so much for getting into all the nitty gritty stuff. Gritability. I guess makes sense. Your podcast name. Any closing comments that you want to share with the audience? Anything that you really want to drive home? Any advice or recommendations or just thoughts?
Yeah, I think it all boils down to if somebody asked me, like, what's one thing that you can really hone in on that made your relationship thrive and survive throughout all of those ups and downs? Communication. If I was feeling like, I don't know if I could do this anymore, I would tell him. How hard is that to tell somebody like, I don't know if I could be with you anymore. It's been 10 years. You got nobody else, but I'm done. And we would talk through that. we would weigh our options. We would just talk through everything. To this day, like I thought it was funny that George said, like, when they fight, you could still see how much love. We really, honestly, we don't fight. He doesn't really get like snippy or anything. I'm a woman. I have hormones. I get snippy and I'll snap at him. He doesn't snap back, which is amazing because that's like human nature to turn around and be like, you're going to say that? I'm going to say worse. So it's just that, like, the communication and just the respect for one another. And I think we've developed that through everything we've been through. But if you really just focus on, like, how do I want to be treated in a relationship? I want to be treated with respect. So when something happens and he's maybe just like having a bad day, instead of me matching that energy and responding like that, how would I want to be treated when I'm having a bad day? I take a couple seconds and then what do you need? Like, what do you need today? What do you need from me? You're acting a little bit off. Like, do you need to eat? Is something bothering you? Is something on your mind? That type of thing. Just communicate, communicate, communicate. I cannot stress that enough. Respect your partner. And I promise, like, that's the recipe. That's what I learned from my parents for all those years. That's what I learned in my relationship. And it's really been like the backbone for us.
And it's so, I love that because it really is. They say, like, in therapy, it's about communication. Most people, they talk, but they don't communicate. They're not expressing what they actually need, and the other one isn't listening and receiving it. Everyone gets triggered and reactive, and then your communication becomes reactivity. And you said, and this said, and it's like, oh my God, like, just stop. But really just getting down to it and holding space, because people are afraid of rejection. They're afraid of person leaving. I mean, what you two cultivated was this incredibly deep bond because there was no expectation. You got to know each other so well and go through really hard shit together. And you showed each other that I'm showing up for you because I choose you. You chose each other every day. That's you can't erase that in an argument. You learned so many things during those 10 years, but you were both, again, like you said, and I met Adam when he was on my podcast. I mean, he's got a very, very strong mind. His willpower is incredible. He's got these gifts that he was born with. He'd said that's why he was so good at doing, the things that got him put away. But then he took that and he put it into a totally different sort of energy. But it's like the strength in this guy is incredible. And you match that with your experiences and your abilities. So you two are very exceptional human beings. And I love how inspiring your story is. Again, we talked about the warning for people, but just as an example of being able to get through hardship, in a regular, excuse the word regular, marriage where you don't have the distance and whatnot. But I mean, it's really, really incredible. No matter what, it comes down to communication. So amazing point.
Yeah. And it might be fearful for people because we are constantly like stimulated and on our phones. And you might be next to your husband of 10 years, 20 years, and you don't know how to communicate because you don't have to right now. So don't, like, for the people that are listening that are like, oh my God, like, it seems so obvious. I don't know how. Don't fault yourself. Don't blame yourself. Don't beat yourself up. It'll be uncomfortable a little bit, but like, put your phone away, maybe just at dinner. Start there, and then start developing those communication skills between how that works for you. Because I had a very good friend, like, their communication style between her and her husband, they would bust each other's chops all day long. Like, make fun of each other. That doesn't work for me.
That's unhealthy. It's actually, sarcasm it's toxic. It's actually not a good thing.
I totally agree. And they're not together to this day, by the way.
Yep.
Wonder why.
Yeah.
But like, and that wouldn't work for me. Like, we were in the visit room one time and this guy reached over and he thought he was being playful and loving, but like, he grabbed her love handle. And
oh, no.
It, right?
No,
so, like,
no.
You can't communicate with me like that. I will go inside. Like, that won't be good. So I think
get a punch in the face from me.
Right. Yeah. And me,
whether I was in the prison visiting room or not, I will punch your fucking face.
Punch in the face from me, and I didn't even know who he was. Talk about the jersey. And these are bad examples, but like, your communication style and my communication style might be very different. Yours might be more playful, where mine might be more serious, So that's what I think I'm trying to say is, like, just find your communication style and what works for you as a couple.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really great takeaway. Sorry, folks. It all comes back down to communication. There's really no magic. I mean, the magic is in the communication, just being, speaking from your heart and being real and having no expectation. You guys were forced to have no expectation. You could walk away at any point. And I think that was also a beautiful thing because you knew that there was nothing either one of you could give to the other than just your time and the emotion.
Yeah.
I mean, that's actually really beautiful. And this, again, taking it into a context outside of your particular situation, this is why taking your time and getting to know somebody and being on the phone and having a little bit of physical distance instead of just jumping in is really important. Good luck, ladies, if you live in Vegas doing that, because everyone just wants the next thing, it seems, and other places as well too. But I love this. I love the communication. I love the bonding. I love the realness. I love how you both just got so raw and real. And again, there was no expectation. I think those two are big takeaways. And then everything else just sort of unfolded. You had your great, upbringing, your experience with your parents. Adam had his, his strong, sense of character and self and was able to be vulnerable. And so you were able to, you matched in that way. So, I mean, it's not just the communication and the no expectation. Those were fundamental to allow you to discover each other, and you happened so beautifully to match well, and all the other divine, if you will, things that, were pulling you guys to each other.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it was amazing. Well, again, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. We'll have to have you back when you to talk about the carnivore, because you were doing keto or carnivore, were you not? Okay, we won't. Maybe she wasn't. Okay,
no, maybe it'll get me to stay on it. Yeah, we'll talk about it later.
We'll go for lunch. We'll talk more about it. Anyways, all right. This was an amazing episode. Thank you again.
Of course,
Until
thank you.
next time.